All right, so this is a demo video for how to make linguini with clam sauce. All right, you will then want to get your 4 or 5 cloves of garlic chopped up, kind of rough, not super small mince, or they would be too strong. Next, we will get this into a container off to the side. Following this, get your thyme together. After rinsing this fresh thyme, go ahead and strip the leaves off the stems. We want to have about a tablespoon of loose leaves that we'll then chop and mince up fine. If you don't have fresh thyme, you could use a teaspoon of dried thyme, though I prefer the fresh if I'm able to. This can get into a cup on the side. Our garnish is going to be some parsley. I'm going to want about a tablespoon or so of rinsed and then finely chopped parsley for sprinkling on top as a finishing garnish. We prefer to have flat leaf parsley, but I actually couldn't find any in the store, so I had to make do with the curly parsley, and that's fine. Have that go ahead and cut and off to the side. All right, if you're going to be using tomatoes for the red linguini sauce, this time of year I'm using cherry tomatoes, so I'm going to want to cut those in a 6 cut, so the super small dice end up with about a cup overall. The clams we're using today include some canned clams, which I'm going to drain off so I can get the meat separated from the juice itself. You'll see later on that we're also going to be using some fresh clams as well. All right, so when I drain this off, then I can portion out the meat and use the clam juice separately. If you end up using fresh clams, not canned clams, then you can get clam juice in a bottle if you need to. This is me pouring off the juice so that I can see if there's any sand sediment that was settled in the bottom of the bowl before I then portion that out. So clams do live in sand beds, so they sometimes can have sand kind of attached to the meat itself, even though there's no shells around anymore. Now we measure out a ½ teaspoon red pepper flakes for a little bit of spice and heat. All right, now it's time to deal with our fresh clams. We're going to be working on a blue cutting board here because this is raw seafood. The clams are packaged in a net that is covered with cellophane. There needs to be holes popped in that cellophane so these clams can breathe. They're kept in the refrigerated section of a reach-in at the store. If you're going to move these around, you want to have a bed of ice underneath and perhaps a bag of ice on top to keep them extra cold. We definitely do not want these things to be submerged in water. So if the ice is loose and melts and these things start being submerged in water, they in a sense can drown. I know that they live in the ocean beds and all, it's just a thing. All right, now I want to take these clams and kind of check them over to make sure that I don't have any cracked clams. You see me tapping on a clam right now, and that's if any of these clams are open up and I tap on it, it should close, and if it does, it indicates that it is still alive. If the clam is opened up and I tap on it and it doesn't close, then it is dead. Don't use it. This is showing you a lot number and a tag. This has a date on it of March 11th that it was pulled out of the beds in New Zealand. It was in Vacaville, California by March 17th, so 6 days later, and the use by date is March 24th. Pretty quick turnaround. This lot number 5788 goes back to some system by which we can check and see if these clams are bad. I'm supposed to keep this tag for 90 days to make sure of any recalls. All right, now this is a process to get these clams rinsed. I want to put them into cold water and kind of use my fingers to kind of scrub off any sand and all. I've already checked for any cracked or broken clams. These things were not opening up at all because they're packed on ice. In a sense, they're kind of paralyzed. But after I rinse these out, I want to put them into a colander to kind of hang out and drain. And as they come up to room temp briefly, then they might start to open up. Okay, so once I get this done, as you guys kind of look when I pour off the water, you can see how much sand kind of accumulated in the bottom. I don't want that in my dish, so that's another reason why that we want to rinse these off to get our clams clean before we use them for the cooking. So again, put them in the colander just hanging out. They're going to get going on the cooking process later. All right, now that we have all the things prepped and over at the kitchen, we're going to have a quick review of our staging before we start the cooking process. I'm definitely going to want to use a Calphalon pan that's got the glass lid. Usually not a fan of glass because of the breakage factor, but I'm going to want to see what's going on with the clams to make sure they opened up when they've been steamed. All right, we have our pasta pot ready to go. Water is boiling. We're going to put some salt in there before we start the cooking process. We're only going to be using 12 ounces, 3/4 a pound of linguini because I feel that a pound is too much pasta for the amount of sauce we're generating. The oil we're using today is extra virgin olive oil. It's going to be in an easier dispense bottle. Okay, we have our clams that we talked about how the rinse are put off to the side. Our butter and Parm Reggiano cheese is a garnish at the end, finishing the sauce with the butter, sprinkling on the cheese. Our things that are going to get sauteed up are thyme, our garlic, our red pepper, our tomatoes ends up being about a cup. And a substitute for the 3/4 a cup of wine in the recipe is going to be some vegetable broth. Now, because we are using whole clams here, the recipe says that you need some clam juice. And so if you use all clams, you wouldn't have clam juice, you want to have some bottled. But because we are using some canned clams, what ends up being about 5 or 6 ounces of canned, then we do have enough juice coming out of that can to make up for that. All right, and then of course we have our parsley, which is a garnish at the end as well. And the lemon wedges. Go ahead and start your calfalon pan on a high heat, and at this point I would start the pasta as well. But because we are using the tomatoes, which is the most dense of all those items, I'm going to go ahead and get those in first so that they can start to cook down. Put this on a higher heat. So I want to soften those up. Okay, now while that starts to heat up, let's talk about what our other modification is. Because we're using these whole clams, we want to get steamed and see if they open up to make sure that they are alive. Okay, so after cooking for a while, if they don't open, don't eat them. You could get sick. I'm going to be just putting the vegetable broth in place of wine inside with the other aromatics. I will not be adding in the canned clams because I don't want them to turn into rubber, and not the clam juice because I don't want to evaporate it all away. Cooking these tomatoes down for a couple minutes to have a chance to really soften up. And again, if you're not using tomatoes, you would go straight to the part that includes the garlic and thyme and anchovy. Going on, then it's going to be the garlic and the thyme. The red pepper flake, like some other applications. Okay, don't breathe that in. Put that up. And it's going to be time for the anchovy paste. So I'm going to make a space in the middle so we can talk about that and zoom in. All right, the anchovy paste could be anchovy fillets. You're definitely dealing with small little bones. But for 4 anchovies, I go about 1.5 inches for each fillet. So about a 6-inch string would end up being the equivalent of about 4 fillets. Okay, so clearly you could leave that out, I suppose, but you're really getting away from the idea of linguini and clams. The anchovies are cooked in. Now it's time for that vegetable broth to deglaze. Make sure you guys get any concentrate at the bottom. Okay, so if this were wine, that would start evaporating down quicker than the water. So I'm actually liking the fact that this is more water-based because it's going to steam our clams. Okay, so this had raw clams in it. Go ahead and put a lid on it. Get your raw clam bowl out. And let's go ahead and wash hands while it's starting to come back to a boil. All right, those items are going to be extra clams. Try to get it into the juice, not falling inside too much of the shell. The clam juice itself. Okay, and turn that down a little bit, turn that back up. Because now we're going to bring that to a boil, back to a simmer. And then to tighten that up, we're going to go ahead and work in our butter. Now, if you want this to be dairy-free, don't put in the butter because it was olive oil to start with, and don't use cheese at the end. But if I'm going to use cheese and I like the richness, I'm okay with the butter. All right, so when this melts down, hopefully that should tighten up. Now, over at our linguini, remember the way to check a noodle, it's kind of hot, but pulling out, snap it. All right, off camera, give it a little chew. Okay, it's al dente. In fact, it's got a little chew to it. And that's it's a good thing if it has a little bit of a chew because it's going to finish in the sauce as well. All right, so don't lag on draining off your noodles because you don't want a bunch of water coming in here and messing with that. But it's at this point that I can look through here and see if I have any clams, that one's open, that did not open up, then it's time to get rid of it. And you want to do your best to not disturb these, so that when someone has a clam on their plate, it's actually got one attached inside. All right, so that in there is our puddle. That's where we're gonna get the noodles. Okay, so noodles themselves should be nice and loose. Okay, if you stir them properly. If not, maybe a dunk back in the water. If I can put these in here, let's have a chance to get coated up. That's going to be a bed that I'm going to lay down for the plating. All right, so I want those noodles to get a chance to kind of get some of the juice attached to it. All right, so let's come over to try to get this thing plated up. Be careful where you put your glass as far as the flame, that could shatter. But plating wise, turn this off. It's a pretty heavy pan there. We're trying to just lift up the noodles, like we said, so that we have a bed of most of the noodles. Again, if this is going to be family style passed around the table, then we'd like there to be the clams evenly, perhaps around the perimeter. Pretty much have all the noodles out of there. See, here's an empty clamshell. Whatever. Put it in. Put the sauce into the middle. It'll kind of work its way out to the perimeter. And then garnishing. We're all done with the cooking, so with my gloves on, really want that cheese to have a chance to melt, so I think I want that down first. Again, this is the Parm Reggiano, 2 years aged, good quality stuff. May not seem like it's much, but it's really potent. And then parsley. And I'm not going to squeeze lime juice all over this because people may not want that, but I can arrange the lemons. I'm going to squeeze a lemon juice all over this. People may not want that, but when they go to plate it up, they can hopefully grab themselves a wedge of lemon, squeeze on if they'd like to. All right, and that is our finished dish. The end.